nature, and wildlife. Official YouTube. Best for you. Let's get to know the world of insects by looking at them closely. Dragonflies or dragonflies are a group of insects that are classified as Odonata. Both types of insects are rarely far from water, where they lay their eggs and spend their pre-adulthood. Dragonflies are relatively easy to distinguish from damselflies. Dragonflies are generally relatively large and perch with their wings open or spread out to the side. Damselflies, on the other hand, are generally small, although there are some species that are quite large, have thin, needle-like abdomens, and perch on windows with their wings closed, held together on their backs. Dragonflies and damselflies are widespread in forests, gardens, rice fields, rivers and lakes, to yards and urban areas. Found from the coast to an altitude of more than 3,000 meters above sea level. Some species, generally dragonflies, are strong flyers and have wide ranges. Some other species have specific habitats and narrow living areas. Damselflies usually fly weakly and rarely travel far. The life cycle of a dragonfly from egg to death as an adult varies between 6 months to a maximum of 6 or 7 years. Dragonflies lay their eggs on plants in the water. There are species that like stagnant water, but there are also species that like to lay their eggs in fast-flowing water. After hatching, the dragonfly larvae live and develop at the bottom of the water, undergo metamorphosis into nymphs, and finally emerge from the water as adult dragonflies. Most of the dragonfly's life cycle is spent as a nymph, below the surface of the water, using internal gills to breathe. Dragonfly larvae and nymphs are fierce carnivores. Larger dragonfly nymphs can even hunt and eat tadpoles and baby fish. As adults, dragonflies only live for a maximum of 4 months. Adult dragonflies are never considered as nuisances or pests. Adult dragonflies are also bioindicators of a healthy environment. Dragonflies fly relying on 2 pairs of thin, transparent wings. These wings are shaped like propeller blades whose surfaces are reinforced with a network of blood vessels with a complex structure. Their abdomens are flexible and round and elongated like sticks or needles. Most of the dragonfly's prey also comes from insect groups such as gnats, leafhoppers, termites, mosquitoes, and flies. In fact, certain types of dragonflies make other dragonflies their food. In the ecosystems of tropical and subtropical areas, dragonflies play an important role in controlling insect populations that are pests in agricultural lands. In fact, dragonflies are among the first flying insects on Earth. The fossilized remains of ancient dragonflies show that these animals have existed since at least the Carboniferous era around 360 to 290 million years ago. Indonesia is one of the countries with the highest number of dragonfly species in the world. Of the total 5,680 dragonfly species in the world, Indonesia has 1,126 types of dragonflies belonging to 18 families and 167 genera. Of that number, 433 types include common dragonflies Anisoptera and 693 species include needle dragonflies Zygoptera. Thus, 1/5, 20% of the world's dragonfly species live and breed in Indonesia. The dragonfly family refers to the dragonfly group in taxonomy, namely Odonata. The Odonata order is divided into two suborders, Anisoptera dragonflies and Zygoptera domus flies. The fly. Flies are a type of insect from the order Diptera, from the Greek dip meaning to and ptera meaning wings. The most obvious difference between flies and other insect orders is that flies have only one pair of flight wings called halters. Which are derived from the hind wings on the metathorax, except for a few species of flightless flies. The only other insect order that has two truly functional wings and halters is the Strepsiptera. However, unlike flies, the halters of Strepsiptera are on the mesothorax and the wings on the metathorax. Butterfly. Butterflies are winged insects of the Lepidopteran superfamily Papilionoidea, characterized by large, often brightly colored wings that are often folded together when at rest, and by their vivid, fluttering flight. The oldest butterfly fossils have been dated to the Paleocene, about 56 million years ago, although molecular evidence suggests they are more likely to be from the Cretaceous period. Butterflies and moths are very diverse. In Java and Bali alone, there are more than 600 butterfly species recorded. The types of moths have never been listed completely, but it is thought that there are hundreds of types. Butterflies are also one of the few types of insects that are not dangerous to humans. Many people love beautiful butterflies, but on the other hand, there are few people who do not feel disgusted by caterpillars, even though both are the same creature. All types of butterflies and moths go through life stages as eggs, caterpillars, pupae, and finally metamorphose into butterflies or moths. Grasshopper. Grasshoppers are herbivorous insects of the suborder Califera in the order Orthoptera. These insects have antennae that are almost always shorter than their bodies and also have short ovipositors. Grasshoppers are an example of insects that undergo incomplete metamorphosis. In their transformation, grasshoppers do not undergo a cocoon or pupa stage like butterflies that undergo complete metamorphosis. Grasshopper metamorphosis only goes through the egg, nymph, and adult imago stages. Incomplete metamorphosis, or hemimetabola, is the process of incomplete change in animal form. Animals that undergo incomplete metamorphosis can be characterized by the shape of the young animal being similar to its parent, but there are parts of the body that have not yet formed, such as wings. There are over 10,000 known species of grasshoppers in the world. Grasshoppers belong to the order Orthoptera, and most grasshopper species belong to the family Acrididae. The exact number of grasshopper species is still a subject of research, as many species remain unidentified, especially in tropical areas. Habitat and diet. Grasshoppers are herbivores, meaning they eat plants, and they can be found in a variety of habitats, including grasslands, forests, and farmlands. Grasshoppers are an important food source for many types of animals, and some species are also consumed by humans. Grasshoppers are generally herbivorous, but some species can also be omnivorous and eat other insects, so they are not always true predators. However, there are some types of grasshoppers that are known to be predators, one of which is the praying mantis. Crickets. Crickets, or syrinx are insects that are closely related to grasshoppers, have small cylindrical bodies, almost round heads and long, thread-like antennae. Ants. Ants are all insects that are members of the Formicidae family, Hymenoptera order. Ants have more than 12,500 type species, most of which live in tropical areas. The size of ants is around 0.3 centimeters. Most ants are known as social insects. With colonies and nests that are organized with thousands of ants per colony. Colony members are divided into worker ants, male ants, and queen ants. There may also be a group of guard ants. One colony can control a large area to support their lives. And colonies are sometimes called superorganisms because their colonies form a unity. However, there are only a few species or types of ants in Indonesia that are categorized as pests, including ladybugs. Beetles are the largest group in the animal kingdom, representing about a quarter of all animals. More than 350,000 species of beetles have been identified to date. However, scientists who study beetles' coleopterids believe there are thousands more yet to be discovered. You may be familiar with some of the beetles by their common names: ladybugs, June beetles, weevils, fireflies, stem borers, and potato bugs. No other group has such a wide range of colors, shapes, and sizes. Some beetles are as small as your fist. Others are so small they could fit through the eye of a needle. Many are brilliantly colored, like jewels, while others blend in cleverly with their surroundings. The distribution of beetles is very wide. Beetles can be found in all major habitats in the world, except in the open sea oceans and the continent of Antarctica. They interact with their ecosystems in a variety of ways. Some species of beetles are detritus producers, breaking down dead animal and plant tissue, eating certain types of carrion. And eating garbage. Some species eat fungi. Some species are flower and fruit eaters. There are also species that are parasites or parasitoids. Some other species are predators or predators of other invertebrates. Many species of predatory beetles are important as agricultural pest control. For example, beetles in the family Coccinettidae prey on aphids, scale insects, thrips, and other plant-sucking insects that can cause damage to crops. Caterpillar. Most people on Earth must hate this insect. Yes, caterpillars. You must be one of the caterpillar haters. Therefore, get to know some facts about caterpillars below. Caterpillars, with their various shapes and types spread throughout the world, are indeed a problem in themselves. In addition to their wriggling and somewhat disgusting shape, some types of caterpillars can cause itching and allergic reactions when touched. Caterpillars are the larval stage of members of the order Lepidoptera, an insect order in the same family as butterflies and moths. Like most common names, the application of this word can be used arbitrarily, and larvae can also be called caterpillars. Both Lepidopteran and Symphytan larvae have an iruciform body shape. It's hard not to be captivated by the fragile, fluttering beauty of butterflies and moths. But the caterpillars they grow into with their many colors, shapes, markings, and protective coverings can be just as captivating. What all caterpillars have in common is the remarkable metamorphosis they undergo on their journey from egg to butterfly or moth. The brown marmorated stink bug, Haliomorpha halis, is an insect in the family Pentatomidae, native to China, Japan, Korea, and other Asian regions. In September 1998, it was collected in Allentown, Pennsylvania, where it is believed to have been accidentally introduced. Damn selfly. Dragonflies are insects belonging to the order Odonata, suborder Zygoptera. Dragonflies are usually divided into two large groups, namely dragonflies or cybar and damselflies. Dragonflies have unique characteristics that make them easy to distinguish from other types of dragonflies, namely a slender body shape like a needle and a wing position that is upright when resting. Dragonflies are often found around ponds, swamps, forests, and rice fields. Dragonflies are insects belonging to the order Odonata, suborder Zygoptera. Dragonflies are usually divided into two large groups, namely dragonflies or cybar and damselflies. Dragonflies have unique characteristics that make them easy to distinguish from other types of dragonflies, namely a slender body shape like a needle and a wing position that is upright when resting. Dragonflies are often found around ponds, swamps, forests, and rice fields. The habitat of needle dragonflies is widespread, from along waterways, ponds, swamps, forests, rice fields, to house yards. Needle dragonflies can be found on the coast or in areas with an altitude of 3,000 meters above sea level. Asian ant mantis. Odontomantis planiceps is a small praying mantis with adult sizes ranging between 1.4 centimeters (0.6 in for males and 0.0 centimeters (0.9 in for females. It is commonly referred to as the Asian ant mantis because in its young stage it exhibits Batesian mimicry resembling black ants, especially in instars 1 to 3, which are the stages most vulnerable to predators. Spider. Spiders are a type of arthropod with two body segments, 4 pairs of legs, no wings, and no chewing legs. All types of spiders are included in the order Araneae. Spiders are included in the class Arachnida along with scorpions, spider mites, and all 8-legged mites. The field of study of spiders is called arachnology. Thank you for watching.